Hello, welcome again to my home studio. I am constantly asked what kind of plugins are your favorite plugins. What are your plugins that you're using like nonstop, they're your constant go-tos? So I thought I would do a quick little rundown of a few EQs and compressions that I really like, and maybe a couple of my mastering plugins that I enjoy using. So here we go. Okay, so the first compressor plugin that I use is a staple compressor for me. I use it nonstop on not everything, but pretty much everything. Is the Blackface 1176 FET style compressor. It's in fat channel. I use Presonus. I use Studio One and Presonus. I do use other plugins, as you'll see, but this is probably my number one go-to for compressor. I love the way it sounds. I think that it's got so many different settings as far as ratio goes. To be honest with you, I use the 4:1 more than anything. I don't really use the key filter for anything, but I do sidechain a lot with this. But yeah, anyways, I just like the way it sounds. It's warm and it's responsive. Like if I want to get a lot of attack and punchiness from the drums, it's there. If I want to just kind of like gloss over a vocal and warm it up and just kind of like tame the peaks a little bit, you can do that as well. So yeah, that's one. And my second pick for compressors is the LA2A, whatever you want to call it, ripoff or faithful reproduction as far as a plugin goes. I love this one as well. I don't have as many options as far as, obviously like selecting ratios or whatnot. I feel like this one is, it's warmer and more gentle. If I'm wanting to take something and kind of like bat it down, but in a like really warm and soft way, this is my go-to. I use it on bass guitar. I use it on vocals. A lot of times I'll hit a vocal with an 1176 and then come back and polish it even a little bit more in a gentle way with this, which basically, you crank up your peak reduction to where your needle's tapping out and then you reset your gain. There's really not a lot to it, but I love this plugin and I use it all the time. Also in the fat channel is this vintage EQ. I use this EQ all the time. The high frequency response, this knob right here, the high end sizzle that I get from it, like super high end stuff, is like kind of second to none as far as the plugins that I have. Not saying that there's something out there that isn't a little bit better, but this just the frequency range that hits and the color that this plugin gives is definitely a vintage feel. And a lot of times, if I want to get a super vintage kick or snare or something like that, it's more actually about rolling this off and turning up either the 7.2 or the 4.8. It gives it like a slap without the high-end attack. But anyways, I just go in, turn it on, and I start. Sometimes I don't crank frequencies as much as I cut them and then play with the switch and see what feels good. And if I'm, pretty undecided, I might crank it, play with the switch, and just kind of see what these boosting or cutting these different frequencies does for the color of whatever instrument I'm working on. Anyway, I love this EQ. It's a really good one. Also on the note of EQs, I think it's important. I think it was Joe Carroll had mentioned something one time in a video that made a lot of sense to me. And that is that like, whether it's drums or guitars or whatever, like you have this EQ, for instance, this vintage EQ, you can't put that on everything. I mean, you totally can, but you're just coloring every single channel with the same, with a red or a blue or whatever. And as you use different EQs and different compressors, like even if you don't adjust any knobs on this, by plugging it in, you do actually add a little bit of color to that instrument or that channel. So consider that whenever you're plugging EQs and compressors into each individual channel on your mix, that you're actually adding a little color. And so if every channel gets this EQ, then you're just like slapping that color on that. And that made a lot of sense to me. Like I'll use the vintage EQ and on maybe kick and snare, and then I maybe will use like an SSL EQ on the toms, and then maybe use like a Sheps EQ on the guitars. And by that, not only am I adjusting those EQs, but I'm adding a different color to each individual track. I'm treating it differently, and it's so subtle, but when it all adds up, it actually does something it widens and makes the mix more colorful. It works. Anyways, if you don't believe me, just try it. You'll see. And the next EQ on the list is the SSL EQ. There's a mono and a stereo. I believe this is by Waves, but I use this probably more often than not on kick drum and snare. Again, it colors it right out the gate, but also kind of even just where all of these dials are set, you can just start boosting the high mid, cutting the low, and adding that. I might bump this up to like 80 or 100. It just depends on the track. But just right out the gate where these are set, if you start playing with it, you're going to notice like the beautiful things that it does. I do adjust this probably like, depending like on snare, for instance, I would leave it at about 8K. I would maybe come back down into like the 2300 range for that crack. Anyways, I'm talking about snare drums now. Anyway, I love this plugin, especially for treating the kick and the snare. I love the low end on it. And I don't know. I just like how drums respond to this EQ. It's really great. And yet another EQ that I love is the Sheps 73 by Waves. You can overdrive the fire out of this channel. But again, I just love the adjustability of it. I love where these things are automatically set for cutting and boosting, but you do have the options to boost different frequencies on this mid frequency and the low. You can actually adjust your your range there and then add or minus it or whatever. Anyway, I love this plugin. It's really great. I use this a ton on toms, actually. The high end that I can get in the toms, just the not just the attack, but it does something to the airiness of the room in the tom mics. And I just really like this plugin for that. I do use it on vocals some and on guitar some, but favorite thing to use it on was toms, hands down. So this plugin is not a compressor or an EQ necessarily, but I've recently bought into the Howard Benson Vocal multiplier, and I love this plugin. I love the adjustability of it. You can use it subtly. One of my favorite things to do is actually to take it at one single guitar track and duplicate that entire track and then treat the guitar with this. Maybe like one, for instance, if you go to factory presets, Howard Benson, and in guitars, he has this guitar monster, and you can see it cranks up this low octave. It doesn't really add any doubles or anything, but it's some glue, low octave. Anyways, you can take one guitar track, duplicate it, leave one the way it is, pan it hard left, the duplicated track, pan it hard right, but put like this guitar monster on it. And you want to talk about thick potatoes, baby. It's pretty cool. So yeah, this is kind of turned into a staple one for me, for just trying different things, whether it's on vocals or drums, just to add, thickness or whatnot. And the format on this low octave is actually really great. Sometimes I will use Melodyne. I'll take a vocal, duplicate it, go into Melodyne and pitch it up an octave, 2 octaves, or down an octave, and drag the format to where it sounds halfway decent. This actually kind of captures like an adjusted format that is decent for a low octave. Like, I actually like it. So if you haven't checked this out, you should definitely check it out. It's really cool. Okay, so on to mastering. One that I have come to love here in just the last couple of weeks is this Mixcentric, I believe by Waves. I'm assuming they're all by Waves. One has this little W here. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But here it is. It's the GW Mixcentric. It's a one knob deal. But literally putting this before the master mixer thing that I'm about to show you, put this before it, and in the intensity, depending on the track, you adjust it. But it literally just is a little bit of glue and a little bit of pump before hitting that final, master compression, EQ, and all that. And I've really learned I've learned to love it. It just adds another texture and a color to your final mix. So you should check that one out if you haven't. And last but not least, my actual mastering plugin console, if you will, by Brainworx. It's the Master Desk. I feel like it's kind of my secret weapon a little bit. Other people might not feel that way. I don't really care. It's really, really great. From volume to being able to blend in the amount. This is like kind of like your volume's your input drive, and then you can trim it back if you're a little hot. You can blend in your compressions. You can, the real high-end sizzly stuff, you can add the de-esser there. You can add the harmonic distortion. Foundation, this knob, you turn it up. It makes it a more like bass-centered mix is how I would describe it. And you turn it down and it makes it a more treble-focused mix. It's just like this little kind of mid frequency thing that happens there. It's really cool. You can filter a resonance filter. A lot of times I don't use the high end one, and I'll set this on 315. It just tends to be something that I want filtered there. And just to kind of show you my settings, I generally actually, here's my default louder. This is kind of what my final thing looks like. Anyways, this is where I start. And I'll, adjust the bass and the mids accordingly. Treble and presence, I generally don't touch unless it's just feeling really hot up there. The thing I probably manipulate the most each time is the mono maker and the stereo enhance. On certain songs, cranking that up, man, you want to talk about almost giving you gecko eyes, you know what I mean? Like that when you have headphones on and a mix is so wide that you're trying to look both directions. I don't know if you relate to that, but you can get super wide with that. But that can also hurt you. It does something to the mix. It can lose a little power. So you play with that. And then this mono maker, essentially, to my understanding and to my ear, it's like whatever frequency you select, it has a way of like kind of dialing it down and I don't know, filtering it out. I don't really know. I couldn't tell you, but I know I play with these two knobs. Everything else, like I said, even treble, I don't play with that a whole lot. If it's feeling too trebly, then I kind of go up in the foundation and I let the low end of the mix kind of start to take over a little bit, and it seems to balance out okay. Anyways, this is levels of compression, 1, 2, 3, and 4, generally sit at 3. I don't leak the compressor. I don't typically try to make both sides the same. I just kind of let the track breathe and be what it is. And this limiter turbo, all I know is when it's not on, it ain't as juicy. So yeah, that's it. So these are my favorite plugins right now. I do have some distortions and different things that I use or whatever, but I feel like these are the things that if I was going to say like, does it add or take away from my mix if I use or don't use them, and how do I use them? Like these are like for sure my staples. They're what I maybe doesn't get used on every track, but if it isn't the tracks, like for instance guitars, I may not compress every guitar, but the guitar bus, I'll add all the guitars and I'll get them where I want them, select all the tracks, send them to a stereo bus, and you can almost bet your sweet Biffy I'm going to throw an 1176 on that and just kiss it, just a little bit, and kind of glue them all together. So yeah, I hope this helps. I hope you enjoyed it, and man, I hope you guys have an awesome day.